Good morning guys. Topic for today's video, can you do air conditioning? Can you have an air conditioning unit on an off-grid solar setup? So a common misconception with off-grid solar is that you can't run very energy needy components, for example, an air conditioner like this, or maybe like an electric water heater, electric appliances that use a lot of watts. I think the reason for that misconception is that the majority of systems that you see on the internet, that you see on YouTube, are not designed in order to accommodate components like this. It's definitely possible, it just requires a larger system. So you could run like a 3,000 or a 4,000 square foot house that has a lot of energy needs on a solar system. The thing is that solar system is probably going to be costing in the neighborhood of like maybe $50,000 or $60,000. So typically the larger that your house is, the larger solar system that you're going to need, just because there's going to be more components on the inside of the house that are going to require electricity, and there's probably more people in the house that are going to be using those components. So we live in a 200 square foot tiny house, so it's a small home. So to speak specifically about air conditioning, this is a mini split ductless unit. So we have our compressor unit on the outside, and then we have our evaporator and blower unit that is on the inside of the tiny house. And so basically between this unit and the unit on the inside, the refrigerant lines are run up this chase, up the side of the tiny house, and also the electrical lines are run through that as well to power that motor on the inside. So there's three main things that you want to know about the air conditioner before you purchase it for your application. Number one thing that you want to know is what is the voltage of the air conditioner. This unit here runs on 120 volts. Most AC units, especially the large ones for a larger home, that's going to be running on 230 or 240 volts. The reason why that is important is because you need to know whether or not the inverter that you have for your solar system only produces 120 volts or it is able to produce 240 volts. So for a lot of tiny homes like ours, you're gonna want to go with a unit that's only gonna be 120 volts. And the reason for that is because a lot of tiny homes are just plugged into either a 15 amp receptacle or a 30 amp receptacle. And unless they have a special hookup to a panel that's supplying that outlet with 240 volts, it's almost always gonna be 120 volts. And if you have a unit that requires 240 volts, it's not gonna work when you only have 120 volts available. The second thing that you want to know is how many watts does this require? So if you look at the specs of an air conditioner like on Home Depot or Lowe's, it'll usually list the amperage and also the voltage that it runs at. All you have to do in order to figure out how many watts it is you multiply them together. So a typical big household air conditioner unit requires about 5,000 watts. This unit here, since it's so small and it's only providing air conditioning for such a small space, it only requires 1,000 watts. So when we factor that into one of our energy loads on our solar system, we factor in the 1,000 watts as obviously one of our major loads for it. The third thing that you want to know whether or not the air conditioner is actually going to be big enough to cool down the area that you have. Usually, typically with a unit like this, it'll say about how many square feet that it can handle. I think this unit said that it can handle about 400 to 500 square feet. So for our purpose, living in a small 200 square foot house, it's plenty large enough to provide us with all the air conditioning that we need. So what's really cool with this, since we live in such a small space, is that we can turn our air conditioner on and within about 5 minutes, the house is pretty well cooled down. So in order to be able to run an air conditioner comfortably, pretty well anytime that you want, obviously you need enough panels in order to generate enough electricity and also enough battery storage to get you through the night until you get sun again in the morning. So to put this into perspective for you, when the air conditioner is on with the compressor, it requires 1,100 watts of power. 4 of these panels will provide about 1,100 watts when they're getting full sun. So each panel here is about, probably generates around 280, 290 watts. So you get 4 of them together, and then that'll give you about the power that you're gonna need in order to run an air conditioner. So you can see here we have 16 panels on our array. We actually only use 15. We had to change the configuration because our input voltage was a little bit too high doing a 4x4 series, 4 panels in series. So we have to do 3 panels in series to get us at about 90 to 100 volts for our input voltage going into our charge controller. So one of the next things that you want to look at with your solar system and whether or not you're going to be able to run some power needy equipment like an air conditioner, electric water heater up there, is how many watts does it produce. So I would recommend a minimum of an inverter that's going to be, like if you're going to be doing an air conditioner, like a small air conditioner like we're doing, you're going to need an inverter that's probably going to be at least 4,000 watts, because you want to have that extra kind of buffer of the extra 3,000 watts for everything else that you're doing. If you have any electric cooking appliances, you want to make sure that you're going to be able to run those when the air conditioner are going, plus a myriad of other things that you could be running in your house. So I'd definitely say for a smaller off-grid solar system like ours, is that you'd want at least 4,000 watts for your inverter. So our battery pack definitely looks a little bit different than most off-grid solar setups. These batteries came from a fully electric smart car, and the battery pack was produced by Tesla. And it's a lithium-ion battery setup. And one thing that I'd really recommend, since lithium-ion batteries are becoming much more common and available, is to always, if you're doing an off-grid solar setup, go with lithium-ion batteries. Do not go with the AGM lead acid batteries. And the reason for that is that lithium-ion batteries like this have a lot of advantages over a lead acid battery setup. So there's no maintenance with these batteries at all. You don't have to top them up with distilled water or anything like that. You can mount them pretty well however you want. So you can mount it like this, you can mount them like this on the wall. It doesn't really matter. I can mount them on the ceiling. It's not going to make a difference. With lead acid batteries, you can typically only discharge them to about 50%. With a lithium ion battery setup, you can discharge them typically between 20 to 30% of their full capacity. So you're going to be getting a lot more discharge out of the batteries for the same amount of watt hours. What's also really nice about lithium ion batteries is that they're rated for many more cycles than lead acid batteries. I remember reading on Technomatia's blog. They have a great blog about how they set up their lithium ion battery setup for their RV. Lead acid batteries typically only get about 500 cycles. So they can cycle up and down between being fully charged and down to about 50% about 500 times. A lithium ion battery setup like this should be able to cycle about 2,000 times. So they have about 4 times the longevity of lead acid batteries. So that's something to definitely take into account when you're looking at different components, is that lithium ion batteries, they're going to be more expensive up front, but the great thing about them is that they last longer and you're going to get much more use out of them. And batteries over time do degrade. So this battery setup here is 18 kilowatt hours. Over time, it's going to degrade. And we might only be getting 17 or 16 kilowatt hours over time until it gets to a point where you need to replace the batteries. So even lead acid batteries, you're going to have to replace them. These lithium ion batteries, you're going to have to replace them in the future. But we have 18 kilowatt hours worth of storage. And for usable capacity, we're probably at somewhere between 13 to 14 kilowatt hours. And to put this into perspective, a Tesla Powerwall, the new Tesla Powerwall 2, it has 13.5 kilowatt hours of capacity. So the actual amount of kilowatt hours in the Powerwall 2 is probably somewhere about the same as this. So it's probably 17 or 18 kilowatt hours. And what's also nice with the Powerwall 2 is that it comes with a charge controller already built in and the inverter built in that can supply 5,000 watts of continuous power. So that'll kind of give you an idea about how much a solar system like this is going to cost. So our system costs about $14,000, which included all the materials to do the ground mount for the panels. I guess it would technically only be $13,000, about $700 because one of our panels we're not going to be using. So I'll just use that in a future solar setup. So about $13,500 for everything. I installed everything myself. So I'm guessing to get a comparable system, if you use many of the same components, your battery cost might be a little bit higher because these were used batteries. I would say you're gonna be spending at least between $10,000 to $15,000 if you want a suitable system, if you want to be running an air conditioner and say like an electric water heater or electrical cooking appliances. If you don't have an air conditioner, if you don't have those power needy components, then you don't need a system nearly this big. What I would recommend though is getting a good charge controller and getting a good inverter, because you can always add on more panels in the future. If you find that maybe you only have a setup with 9 panels or maybe 6 panels. And in the future, you can always add on more panels. With batteries, lithium ion batteries, it's a little bit easier to add onto them. With lead acid batteries, typically when you buy a bank of batteries, you just want to use that until they're done. And you don't really want to add on any more while you already have your battery bank. So I definitely recommend that you get a decent sized battery bank you're going to want at least 12 kilowatt hours, I'd say. The more that you can afford, the better. So it's just going to give you more peace of mind knowing that you can use a lot more electricity and not have to worry about whether or not you're going to basically drain the batteries all the way down to the bottom. So just over the past couple of weeks here in southern Arizona, we're getting temperatures like 105, almost 110, and we're just right before a monsoon season. So typically right before the monsoon season, we get like a big heat wave. And my neighbor sent me a message and he's like, hey man, like how are you doing with this heat? I'm like, I just cranked up our AC. We run it all throughout the day. And then I lower the thermostat temperature during the night. And he's like, really? You can run air conditioning on a solar setup? I'm like, oh yeah, man, you definitely can. And he's like, I gotta come check out your system. So I think a lot of people, when they start looking at off-grid solar, they just kind of have it in their mind that doing an air conditioner, maybe an electric water heater. I mean, we have lots of other electrical cooking appliances, a rice cooker, instant pot, electric cooktop. We run it all on solar. It just comes down to how much money are you willing to invest into a system that's sized properly and designed properly for your needs. That's what it really comes down to. I remember when I was installing the solar system, and I posted, I think 6 or 7 videos about the installation. So if you want to see how I installed it, go check out those videos. I'll leave them at on the end card here, the playlist to it. Someone even sent me an email and just basically said that we would only be able to run our air conditioner for a couple hours on our solar setup with our battery setup. And I was just like, that's just not even close to being true. Some people are just a little bit misinformed about how a solar system can work. It just depends how much money you're willing to put into it. You can run pretty well anything on an off-grid solar setup. And what it really comes down to, say you had a hot tub that is like an electric hot tub, so the water is heated through electricity. And I think those typically take 60 amps at 240 volts. So you're looking at something around 15,000 watts or something like that it's going to require. So a lot of power. You could certainly design a system that's big enough. That system's probably going to cost you $70,000 or $80,000. So if you just reduce the amount of loads that you have on your solar system, you can get away with a smaller system. Even with our system here, say if you had a small home like this, you could probably eliminate 2 of these battery modules. So you have 4 instead of 6, and you could probably eliminate 6 of the panels out there. So you could run on 9 panels. And I would still stick with the same size charge controller and inverter, and you could probably save yourself a few $1,000s just doing that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be $13,000 or $14,000. You could probably get it down to $10,000 or $12,000, but that's also dependent on where you live and how much sun that you're going to get. We live in sunny Arizona. I think we have about 300 sunny days of the year. So we have tons of sun, and it's really actually quite easy to do solar out here because there's just so much sun. If you have any comments or questions, leave them down below. Just understand you can do an air conditioner on an off-grid solar system. It's certainly possible. Awesome. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Talk to you soon.